Hello, friends. For this series, I'm inviting you to read a short story with me every week. This is Anthologized. I'm Amanda Corbin from Milestone Art Collective, and I'll be here every week or so to tell you about a short story that's been widely anthologized, to talk about how the author did what they did from a craft standpoint, and share a writing prompt based on the story. Before I begin, I want to say thank you to our patrons who support our work at Milestone Art Collective. We are so grateful. If you're interested in becoming a patron, you can find us at patreon.com/Milestone Art Collective. This week, I'm talking about Robert Stone's short story, Helping. It was originally published in The New Yorker in 1987, and it also appeared in his short story collection, Bear and His Daughter, in 1997, which was nominated for the Pulitzer. Before that, Stone's second novel, Dog Soldiers, won the National Book Award in 1975 and was adapted into film under the title Who'll Stop the Rain, starring Nick Nolte. His third book, A Flag for Sunrise, was nominated for the National Book Award twice, once in hardcover and once in paperback. Born in Brooklyn to a schizophrenic mother whose hospitalization led to his spending several years in an orphanage, Stone was later expelled from Catholic school for, quote, coming to school drunk and, worse, talking a classmate into renouncing Catholicism. This is according to his biographer, Madison Smart Bell. Stone joined the Navy at 17, then briefly attended New York University, but it was being granted a Stegner Fellowship at Stanford that launched his writing. There he also met Ken Kesey and the Merry Pranksters, which he wrote about in his nonfiction book, Prime Green. Here's another quote from Madison Smart Bell. I think Robert Stone is the writer of his generation who pushed the possibilities of realistic fiction, the representation of who we are in the time we live in, as far as they can go. Push the possibilities of realistic fiction. So, spoiler alert, if you haven't read Helping, you can find it in The New Yorker online, in the aforementioned collection of short stories, or in a number of fiction anthologies, and there are links to those below. So, you've been warned. So, as I said, Robert Stone's novel, Dog Soldiers, features a Vietnam War correspondent, and Stone himself went to Vietnam as a journalist. He said, quote, I realized if I wanted to be a definer of the American condition, I would have to go to Vietnam. In many ways, it changed my life. And then his biographer explained, before the trip, he had a suspicion that Vietnam was such a key factor in the American experience at the time that you couldn't write anything that didn't somehow include it. Dog Soldiers is the expression of that idea. Vietnam is omnipresent in the novel, though mostly offstage. And I think it's the aftermath of the Vietnam War that's omnipresent in the short story Helping. The protagonist, Elliot, is a veteran and a recovering alcoholic, and a client's description of a dream about Vietnam is what leads to Elliot's falling off the wagon. Here's an excerpt from Helping. Things were unfair, Elliot thought. It was unfair of Blankenship to appropriate the condition of a Vietnam veteran. The trauma inducing his post-traumatic stress had been nothing more serious than his own birth, a routine procedure. Now, in addition to the poverty, anxiety, and confusion that would always be his life's lot, he had been visited with irony. It was all arbitrary. and some people simply got elected. Everyone knew that who had been where Blankenship had not. I had to read that last line of that excerpt a couple of times because of the way it's worded. So Blankenship is a counseling client who has co-opted the identity of a Vietnam veteran, even though he was too young to have gone and did not experience much while he was in the service. So that last line, everyone knew that who had been where Blankenship had not. So those who had been over to Vietnam and those who had seen combat knew that it was all arbitrary, and some people simply got elected. Kind of a bleak thought, but this is kind of a bleak story. And those details about the war put the story in a particular time period, which is an element of the setting. And this story, like the novel Dog Soldiers, we're seeing Vietnam is included, but the action of the war has happened off-page before the story began. And here's another quote about that opening part of the story. Blankenship had misappropriated someone else's dream and made it his own. It made no difference whether you had been there after all. The dreams had crossed the ocean. They were in the air. So it's in the air, but it's not the main focus of the story, or even the main focus for the protagonist. We don't see any flashbacks or hear many details at all about his time over there. It's more of a mood. So while the dream that Blankenship describes of the black skies of Vietnam was present on the surface of the story, it seems to be repressed emotions that are driving Elliot to drink. And when his wife comes home from work and finds him drunk, they argue. And he thinks, quote, such anger and confusion. He was tired of pain, anger, and confusion. They were what had got him into trouble that very morning. And there are many mentions of anger throughout the story, how it's disproportionate, how it flares up, and how booze could keep it burning through the darkest night. And then toward the end of the story, he stood in the middle of the field and listened to the crows. Fear, anger, and sleep were the three primary conditions of life. He had learned that over there. Once he had thought fear the worst, but he had learned that the worst was anger. Nothing could fix it, neither alcohol nor medicine. It was a worm. It left him no peace. Sleep was the best. And while anger is simmering throughout the story, it does end on a hopeful note. Elliot began to hope for forgiveness. He leaned the shotgun on his forearm and raised his left hand and waved to her. Show a hand, he thought. Please just show a hand. He was cold, but it had got light. He wanted no more than a gesture. It seemed to him that he could build another day on it. Another day was all you needed. He raised his hand higher and waited. So while there is a lot of anger and sadness and confusion, there is still hope at the end of this story. And I can't talk about this story and not talk about the dialogue. So I want to go, that was the end of the story, but I want to go back to the middle, I guess, when Elliot and his wife are talking, because some of that dialogue is just devastating. We see anger again, but also heartbreak. Elliot's wife, Grace, says, "In my family, we stay until the fellow dies. That's the tradition. We stay and pour it for them, and they die." And then as their conversation goes on, she brings up losing a court case at work where an abused child will remain in the custody of violent parents who have also been following her on her way to work. And here's an excerpt of their exchange, their dialogue back and forth. "This one I think will die," Grace said. She took a deep breath and puffed out her cheeks and looked at him forlornly. "The situation's extreme. Of course, sometimes you wonder whether it makes any difference. That's the big question, isn't it?" "I would think," Elliot said, "that would be the one question you didn't ask." "But you do," she said. "You wonder, ought they to live at all, to continue the cycle?" She put a hand to her hair and shook her head as if in confusion. "Some of these folks, my God, poor things cannot put Wednesday on top of Tuesday to save their lives." "It's a trick," Elliot agreed. "A lot of them can't manage." "Maybe you're better off. Maybe your kids are better off unborn." "Better off or not," Elliot said. "It looks like they'll stay that way." "I mean our kids, of course," Grace said. "I'm not blaming you, understand? It's just that here we are with you drunk again, and me losing Vopatic. So I thought, why not get into the big, unaskable questions?" That whole scene is so heavy with her work and her thinking about it, and we know that he works with other people too and as a counselor, so there is a lot of heaviness, and then that's on top of their own personal stuff with their unborn children and that conversation, and then also him having fallen off the wagon and the initial confrontation there. So this whole story is just it's the story of the day he falls off the wagon and everything is connected to that. But it is just that snapshot of that day, and it's a really interesting portrait in that way. So I hope you enjoyed reading it and thinking about some of those elements of the story, the time period, the mood and emotion that permeates the story, and those moments of dialogue. As far as a writing prompt, with writing prompts, I always tell my students to go with what inspires you rather than strictly adhering to anything I suggest. So maybe you read this story and were inspired to write about addiction or working in a difficult profession, or maybe you just want to examine one day when everything changes. So if so, go with any one of those as your prompt. Or, as a simple prompt, you could ask yourself what time period you're interested in. What time would you like to explore in your writing? From there, what defines the time period? What key factor of the cultural experience is omnipresent, even if it's off-page? From there, what mood or emotion is permeating everything? What's under the surface for your characters and for people at large? And finally, can you include dialogue where characters confront one another? can one of them ask the big, unaskable questions? I hope this story and prompt inspire you to write something meaningful to you and the time period that you've chosen to explore. Next time, I'll be reading and talking about The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas by Ursula K. Guin. And I invite you to read along with me and join me here next time. If it's more convenient, you can use the link provided to get a copy of the anthology that the story appears in. I hope you'll join me next time for some fiction craft talk about this story and try a writing prompt. Until then, happy reading.